than just having straight talks. So the idea here is that we will talk now in a conversation about how to look at the threats and opportunities to futurize democracy. And we have 6 speakers here whom I have asked to give very short inputs. Then we will have a panel, but there are enough microphones here for you and to go on interventions and discussions. Okay? Are you ready for that? Okay. There are basically 3 or 4 topics which we want to discuss. One is basically, what is it in terms of technology and social movements? What is it in terms of AI and climate sustainability? What is it in terms of AI and citizen participation? And in which way does AI and social empowerment with governance and also the organization of the state work together? So the first person I would like to ask to give his impact contribution is Madara Ugut. Madara is a professor in Kenya, but he's also the CEO of the Ubuntu Net Alliance for Research and Education. And I thought that he might be really interesting because of his observations on how the student movement, which was so incredibly mushrooming 2 years ago in Kenya and made the government retreat on its tax issues, on its funding issues and so on, how the student movement has actually evolved. And Kenyans on Twitter has been a real transformative force of the political space and the democratic constitution in Kenya. Madara, do you want to take a microphone? Do you want to go to a lectern? Which way? It's lovely to see you here.
Sure.
Great that you could come all the way from Kenya.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here. I'm going to begin with a little story. In that generation that was born free. What I mean by that, I was born 1 year after independence of Kenya, 1964. Kenya got independence in 1963. So you grew up with parents who were not born free. And for a long time, they ingrained in your mind the importance of being able to vote, the importance of civil duty, now that you're governing yourself. So that we looked forward as young people growing up to reach 18, which is the legal age to vote in Kenya, to get your ID. Every Kenyan has a national ID at 18, and be able to vote. And I want to take us a little bit back. At that time in Kenya, TV was one TV station owned by the government, started at 5 o'clock, ended at 11:30. Newspapers were 2, both in English. And so the majority, there were no mobile phones, no internet, the majority of information you got to vote came from the politicians themselves. And for them to get you to vote, they literally went around and took a lot of effort to tell you why you should vote for them. The number or the rate of voting was very high. In the 80s, 85% of all registered voters voted. Fast forward to now, where we have the internet, a lot of access to information. And then last year, what Peter was alluding to, Kenya saw something that we hadn't seen before. Young people didn't really care so much about the politics as much as we did when we were younger. Because again, part of it is our fault. Since we were born free, maybe we didn't impart on them the importance to vote as our parents did. But last year, 2024, a new government came in. They began imposing so many taxes on us that young people, the elite young people, let me say, decided enough was enough. And they took on digital tools, Twitter mainly, Kenyans on Twitter, as Peter has mentioned, but also WhatsApp, because not many Kenyans are on Twitter. and organized and galvanized themselves to say enough was enough. And they poured out onto the streets when Parliament was going to vote on the next finance bill, which had a lot of new taxes. And their issue was, we will invade Parliament and we will not accept this vote. They were leaderless because you couldn't tell who was leading them. They were tribeless, part of our challenge, I vote for my tribe. And they poured out on the streets in such numbers that the government and everybody was shocked and really could not stop them. It's very hard to move back masses with the riot police if young people cover every single street in downtown. How do you move them back? Move them back where to? My daughter was there. And of course, with the concerned parents calling them, please get out of there, it's dangerous. After a while, her, like everybody else, turned off their phone so you couldn't reach her. Eventually, they did invade Parliament, literally. The finance bill was passed quickly before they invaded, but the shock that impacted the country was such that the president realized it's a bad idea to sign it. Now, this way to mobilize people came about through digital tools, as has happened in many countries as well. And we got this feeling, this swell, that finally the Gen Zs have woken up. They constitute more than 50% of the population of voting age are these young people. And therefore, they can make an impact if they vote, which they have not been voting in the past, and largely was because of these tools that we will be discussing. But there was a hidden side to it, and I was educated on this by a young lady when I was coming on a taxi, and I saw her somewhere here yesterday. The part we tend to forget as I close. I know I had very few minutes. If I can just kindly ask the first 2 or 3 rows only, just yell very loudly, okay? When I say 1, 2, 3, yell, yay, as loud as you can. 1, 2, 3. Yay! Okay. If somebody was walking by, you would think we're all yelling yay. It's just these rows. And that's what happened. The Gen Zs that we saw last year, we thought it was all of them. It was a small number. Now, it was a few 100,000. But that age group is several million in Kenya. So it seemed like a large number, but several million were silent. Why were they silent? They don't have access to a lot of the tools that are being used, as Osama mentioned. They didn't know what was going on, so they were watching it on TV like the rest of us, all the people were watching it on TV. So in as much as we talk about the wonders of the digital tools in supporting democracy, we also have to see how can these tools reach those who currently do not have access for various reasons, which we'll get into when the discussion begins. Because until we do that, the digital divide is only increasing to those who have access, who can be galvanized, who can act, but the vast majority are in the silent group that are excluded. Thank you, Peter.
Navarro, good. Please take a seat, and we will have the next input from Dashna Shah. Is Dashna here? She is the Chief AI Officer in the United Kingdom for a place called ElastaCloud. And I thought that this is wonderful what you are doing in terms of 2 things. One is to look at the landscape, the shifting landscape of sustainability leadership, and also the issue in terms of which AI is actually a contributor in terms of facilitating leadership. Dashna, it's wonderful that you're here. Did you have a good travel?
I did, thank you, Peter.
Yes.
It's truly an honour to be in such an energising, creative space and community. So really looking forward to the next.
Can you all hear her? No. Do you want to have my microphone? Because this seems to be...
Not working. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's better. I was just saying, an absolute privilege to be here with you all, an extremely energizing and creative community. So very much looking forward to the next 3 days. Okay. What if, in the future, we don't vote for our leaders, AI does? It's quite a thought-provoking question, isn't it? But given the uncertainty, risk, and threat to our security, we would be quite smart not to give this advanced technology even more autonomy and power. But given the volume of data, this record speed at which these algorithms can come up with comprehensive and effective solutions, shouldn't we at least consider it a bit further? So let's take a step back and actually look at the current AI power and influence distribution. So over time, as our societies have grown more and more complex and advanced technology further and further, we have established pathways of power. And this is, as a society, human members giving governing bodies more and more power through democratic processes and entrusting them with the responsibility to action various sanctions and rewards to not only corporations but to broader society to maintain alignment to our common goals. This is the perceived pathway of control. So under this term, corporations would be governed by relevant governing bodies to ensure that AI generated aligns with our communities and our societal norms. But it's what's actually happening is the corporations are pumping billions and billions of pounds into voting campaigns, business alliances that actually enable them to be the power holders. And a lot of the AI and solutions that they develop off the back of this is governed towards one thing: making money. And this is why you'll see over the last couple of years that many big tech companies, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Meta, are all racing towards artificial general intelligence. They're pumping billions and billions into AI infrastructure and advancing these algorithms even further. And this isn't just about technological supremacy. It is about control, power, and the influence to govern what our new fabric of society looks like. And whilst this centralized approach might have some benefits, rapid innovations and advancements, it also threatens the ethics of what this technology can do. So let's look at these threats a little bit more. So we have cyber offense. We've already spoken a lot around the misinformation. We see now generative AI models that are specifically tuned to capitalize on vulnerabilities, deceive people through deep fakes, acquiring financial information, or persuading or manipulating us into believing certain political narratives. And as these algorithms kind of advance, they will be able to do long-term horizon planning, which may enable them to acquire weapons, develop other AI, even grow their situational awareness so they can self-proliferate out of our control. So let's look at an example a little bit further. Social media. Big techs have exploited our attention spans algorithmically, and they've done that so that they can sell us more products and make more money. Unfortunately, human brains haven't quite kept up with the evolution of technology, and we're still very much wired to search for threats in our environments. And this typically keeps our attention focused on hate, polarization, and ignorant content, leading us to have more concerns around growing war efforts and election chaos. But like with all powerful technology, there is also the good and the bad. So let's look at the good. So the climate crisis, AI has the potential to create much more robust geoengineering solutions, things like sequestering carbon or entirely redesigning renewable solutions. We also have the ability to optimize reforestation projects so that we can maintain biodiversity. Within healthcare, we have the ability for online global monitoring, so things like pandemics can be more effectively accounted for. We can roll out medicines more effectively to those who need it, and we could potentially even eradicate entire diseases like HIV, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. Security, with online monitoring, we have the ability to look at rapid amounts of data and even self-heal and fix vulnerabilities before they're even detected. Ending poverty, with the ability to advance supply chains, optimize them, ensure better water cleaning facilities, and even democratize education more broadly, we could bring everybody up to that level playing field. Scientific discovery, designing new drugs, accelerating space exploration, putting ends to debates of decades and decades of physics theories would enable us to kind of propel forward. Education, we could potentially hyper-personalize education, accounting for cultural differences and individual differences better so that everybody has an effective education and a much more unified world. So we could even use a lot of this AI to enable us to look at the ethical considerations and even the transparency issues around AI more effectively. Funnily enough, this actually maps onto the UN Sustainable Development Goals really well. So I've spent the last decade as the Chief AI Officer, obviously started out as a data scientist, looking at how this technology has evolved. I started out in a neuroscience background, the very fundamental basis on which AI is modeled upon. And I've seen AI have fundamental great impacts in renewables, in healthcare, but more recently I've seen a lot more detrimental effects where we're looking to completely displace humans, particularly in customer services lines. And the big tech companies are exacerbating this with the rapid innovations, but they're also the leading pioneers of many of the great solutions that are being put out. So we've got Google DeepMind. They've recently made rapid advancements with AlphaFold, enabling us to much more effectively come up with new designs for drug discovery by being able to predict how proteins fold better. We've got Neuralink, which will have life-changing quality differences for those with brain and spinal injuries. And SpaceX, accelerating our space exploration and potentially even sustainably, as with recent news events. So AI is here to stay. It will change the fabric and DNA of our society, but whether it's for the good or the bad is really within our control. And for the good, we have the opportunity to change some of humanity's biggest challenges and come up with some great solutions. So with that, I will leave you with a quote from one of the greatest innovators, Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much, Dashna. You can leave this here. That's very good. Thank you also. Stay here on the podium, please. We will move on and have an input from Uma Kalka. Is Uma here? Uma, thank you very much. She's a data and AI governance expert, and I thought to ask her a little bit more about citizen participation and AI, and you have a very good microphone here. Go ahead. You can use this or both. Okay, fine.
Thanks so much for this, Peter. Hi, everyone. Oh.
No, who's coming next?
Now? Okay, yeah, that works. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to the World Summit Award for having me. Thank you again, Nora, for the invitation as well. Is that better? Fantastic. Today, I want to talk to you about potential kind of, trajectories in AI and how we can leverage futures thinking in order to really improve the resilience and agility of our AI governance. So, as Peter mentioned before, my name is Uma Kalkar. I'm an AI expert who's currently seconded into the OECD's Strategic Foresight Unit, and I'll touch on a little bit about what we do there later on in our presentation.
You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I know. So, over the past 10 years, we've had a lot of capability advancements with AI as we've seen not only the ability, but the pace of development to grow exponentially. We have AI systems now that can even surpass or match human performance. And these aren't just technical achievements. Who controls these systems, how we use them, and whose interests are protected by them enable us to reshape our societies, our economies, and ultimately our democracies. And so that's where strategic foresight comes in. This is a methodology that we use in order to explore a range of different futures in a really practical and systematic way that allows us to also challenge underlying assumptions that we might hold in preconceived notions, while also tapping into collective and diverse intelligence. In a way, it allows us to go from reaction to reflection and kind of turn from paralysis into preparedness in the face of uncertain and changing events, as we're clearly seeing quite rapidly in the AI spaces. Simply put, strategic foresight is a way that technologists, policymakers, and communities can see weak signals before they become strong problems. And it allows us to not only build this resilience, but also be innovative and stay ahead of the curve. Strategic foresight is one of the many tools that we use at the OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, in order to assess those signals and figure out how we can, support policymakers. The OECD, it's a forum of 38 member states, and we really are focused on creating better policies for better lives. And we do this through data and evidence-based analysis that then feeds into public policy and international standard setting. Our unit, the Strategic Foresight Unit, is based in the Office of the Secretary General. And what we do is we act almost like a little mini consultancy. We work with internal units as well as our members and our partners in order to build out that foresight capacity. And in 2023, we launched, along with OECD AI, this expert group on AI futures, bringing together experts from across the world to, look at what could be future trajectories of present-day AI systems, as well as possible advancements to suggest forward-looking policy solutions for what's to come in AI. And back in October, we ran this global strategy group meeting, which is the second highest level meeting that the OECD holds, with input from that group in order to look at what could be a couple of potential futures of AI governance. We looked at, a best case scenario with a rules-based international order and equitable and thriving access. Basically, all of the problems that have been mentioned across the few days are rectified. We looked at two suboptimal ones, one where we have a lot of regulation in order to ensure responsible AI, but yet low diffusion, and vice versa, as well as a worst-case scenario, where we see regulation not able to keep up with the pace of AI development and, test social cohesion and democracy as a whole. And this really raises some questions about how does AI fit into our existing economic and political systems? And at the same time, how does our democracy need to be revamped in order to be resilient to these futures? So there's 4 kind of pressure points, as I call them, that I think are important to touch on here. The first is looking at who has access and who has power. Currently, as we all know, a handful of companies concentrated in a couple of regions in the world control how AI is developed, who benefits, and therefore also who doesn't. And so coming up with ways to create national labs and supercomputing and cloud computing capacities, as we're seeing across the US with their El Capitan supercomputer, a bunch of other folks also doing similar things across Latin America and the EU, the Gaia X program, which is a project started by France and Germany in order to create a network for cloud computing, as well as the ARIA, which is a bit of a public kind of research investment fund housed by the UK, can allow us to diffuse that power and control across society and deal with this concentration and increasingly oligopolistic control over economic and political levers of AI. The second is updated education. The knowledge gap between socioeconomic groups, genders, and geographies becomes a power gap. And so we're seeing, some examples here. I've got one from Estonia, where we have this Elements of AI course that provides a basics on what is AI and how does it work in order to raise the baseline awareness and understanding within the population. We also have an example from Finland, that's the Audigo program, that specifically targets seniors and older folks in order to make sure that they are also involved in the digital inclusion and awareness journey. Third, I want to touch on ways that we can uphold our digital civil rights. We talk a lot about how democracy is rooted in principles of transparency and fairness and accountability. And there are examples across our OECD member states where these are actions that are being taken to support responsible AI governance. In the Netherlands, we have this algorithmic registry that allows any citizen to understand what algorithms the government uses, when, and why. In Canada, we have this algorithmic assessment tool that allows developers to kind of gauge how risky their platform models are and test it out before deployment. And lastly, I want to touch on this issue of institutional readiness and creating new paradigms. AI developments extend beyond borders. That's also what's brought a lot of us here together today. And this requires harmonized governance frameworks between countries so that way we can have a coordinated and dynamically organized AI governance regime. Instruments like at the OECD, our recommendation for the recommendation by the Council on AI helped us kind of outline this shared definition of what an AI system is. This then, fed into the EU AI Act's definition for AI and kind of helped snowball how we think about an AI system for governance purposes. Similarly, we see guidelines popping up from the G7, from UNESCO, to help developers at the deployment and the development stage look at ways of integrating humanistic and safe, secure, and trustworthy principles into their AI builds. And so, bringing all of this together, my parting message to all of you folks in the room today is that we must not let our legacy governance systems lag behind the algorithm. Just like any good software, democracy also needs to be updated in order to stay functional, secure, and fit for purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uma. Okay. Thank you very much, Uma Kalke. Please. I think that there are still a lot of questions being touched upon and open, especially regarding also what is it actually, in which way governance issues are actually opening up opportunities for citizen participation. You met already Rama Devi Lanka. She is the Director of Emerging Technologies here in Telangana State. And she's also working on AI technologies and how actually AI technologies are part of the prioritized agenda of the Telangana government in order to make the government more responsible to the way particular measures affect local citizens. Rama, are you ready?
Yes.
You said that you have also some slides. You don't have slides. Do you want the microphone? I'm willing and happy to share with you this very good microphone. Please, Rama.
Thank you. I think it's, again, good morning, everyone. Well, I thank WSA for giving me this opportunity to share our government's experiences. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you.
Can you not turn the microphone off, please? I'll do it. Thank you.
Well, I lead the emerging technologies wing in Government of Telangana. Uh, we have set up these emerging technologies with a twin objective, This was in the midst of fourth industrial revolution. This has started somewhere around, I'm not sure about the exact year, but this started somewhere around between 2015 and 17. So as a nation, as a country, we have missed all the three industrial revolutions earlier in terms of capitalizing them to improve lives, to decrease poverty, and to transform lives. While other nations, mostly Western countries, could actually use the earlier three industrial revolutions to prosper, India somehow lost that opportunity. So when fourth industrial revolution has come, where the digital technologies like blockchain, AI, cloud, drones, space tech, all these, we believe these constitute Industry 4.0 technologies. We didn't want to miss the bus this time because as a country, we are known for using digital technologies. We are the IT powerhouse. So we didn't want to miss out this revolution. So our government has set up this emerging technologies division primarily with two objectives. One is, which is very close to our heart, is to leverage these technologies to empower individuals to solve problems at the ground level, rural areas where there is no access for internet, no access for, information and so on, asymmetric information. That's one. Secondly, we want to build the ecosystem for emerging technologies within the state of Telangana. So with these twin objectives in mind, we have set out to actually, you may call it exploiting or leveraging these technologies for the larger good. So, and there was no precedence in India, working in these technologies. The way we worked out was, we came out with policy tech frameworks, because each technology requires different resources, different, what you call, strategies, So we came out with technology-specific framework. For example, if it's blockchain, we said, these are the four things that the government should do. If it's AI, we said, government should work on data, use cases. So these are the kinds. So policy frameworks, then once you have the policy, most of the governments do that. But these documents remain as reports in somewhere, in the office. But we want to really execute these frameworks. So we set up institutions of excellence, or we call COEs, that actually execute these frameworks. And within these institutions, we have teams, experts from the industry, from the government, from the foundations. It's actually leveraging or utilizing the entire expertise out there. So policy frameworks, then building institutions, then coming to the third part, which is again very important, identify use cases within the government where we can solve problems, where we can use these technologies, for empowering citizens. So in our course of journey, while blockchain, others we have actually done extremely well. I'll talk about AI because that's technology today that we are focusing on. So 2020, we said this is going to the year of AI. Nobody did that in the world, I would say. So we focused in that particular year, we focused everything AI. But unfortunately, COVID hit the same year, 2020. But nevertheless, virtually we could accomplish so much. That was a learning for us also, So today, if you look back, look back, the 3 years, 2020 to 24, we have done tremendous work. But 24, what we thought was, that was the chat GPT moment. And our strategy that we have put in place in 2020, we were not sure whether it's relevant today in that context. So we actually realigned our strategy. And in September 24, we organized the Global AI Summit. In fact, that's where, DEF also was part of our, program, and actually showcase some of the social impact solutions. So 2024, we launched the AI roadmap for the state, where we identified 5 key pillars. One is, how do we make the state an AI-equipped state or AI-powered state? For that, we are identifying use cases across sectors or across departments we call health, agriculture, education, environment and forest, transportation, and so on. And today, as I speak, we have identified 5 critical use cases, 2 in healthcare. One problem India is facing today, tuberculosis, TB. While we have contained that disease, but still it is there around this country. Even the Honorable Prime Minister also has actually called upon the states to focus on this particular disease and asked us to use AI to eradicate it. So we are actually announcing a grand challenge where, we have identified different use cases within the government in healthcare, as I said, for TB. Then using radiological images, can we actually, there are tools already out there, but Indian specific tools we yet don't have. So we are announcing these grand challenges and sourcing solutions from the startup community, from the innovators to come out with solutions for those use cases. That's one. Second one, again, as we know, data and models.
One more minute. One more
Oh my
minute.
God. So data is the core, right? So as a government, did I take so much time already?
Yes.
So
If you're interested in talking, time seems very short.
absolutely. So yeah. So data, coming to data, we are making available data, because government has huge data, and we built a agriculture data exchange platform, and today the largest private sector bank is using this platform to offer small loans to farmers, in the remote areas. So we have actually cut down that time, for issuing of loans. So we are building the ecosystem for AI in the state of Telangana by providing access to compute to startups, by building the AI sandbox, so that startups can validate their solutions. And these solutions that we are looking at is, while corporates can also use it, but we want the startups to come out and solve, problems for the government. Government in the sense that solve problems for the citizen. For a farmer, can he increase his yield, can he increase his income? Secondly, can AI reduce accidents? And we have done that, reduce road accidents, because the largest number of deaths in India occurs due to road accidents. So can we use AI to do that? So those are the kind of problems that we're trying to address using AI. And for us, technology, while we are putting in place guardrails, for responsible AI deployment, but we are also conscious that AI can solve problems for India. And the way, it solves, we believe that AI actually accelerates human progress. And hence, we are adopting AI to solve problems for the rural masses, for the unaccessible people who are not able to access, services, information, internet, and so on. So we are using AI to accelerate the progress of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rama, for a positive outlook on how AI can be used and how it can also serve governmental objectives. We're coming 2 more talks. Are you interested in 2 more talks? Yes? Okay, good. Then you will hear from Europe, and I'm very much delighted that Eva Silionier is here. She's doing a lot of consulting around the world, in the Caribbean, but also in Africa, regarding introducing digitization in terms of the governmental operations. But in Lithuania, there's a lot of tradition in terms of citizen participation. And one of the things which I wanted to see and listen to her is, how does governmental structures, state structures, include digitization and AI in terms of citizen participation? Is this a topic you want to speak on this morning?
When I was growing up in when Soviet-occupied Lithuania, even as a child, I could feel that something important is missing, because the gap between what people really wanted and what they had in their reality was too big. We had one party directed truth, one direction, and actually one voice, and it was not ours. And people at some point just didn't want to suffer that anymore, and then a real profound change began, which resulted in Lithuania declaring its independence the first of the Soviet republics in 1990. It was not easy, that's for sure. And then the Soviet tanks rolled in the streets of Vilnius towards our parliament, towards our main infrastructure buildings. In January of 1991, we could not meet with them with weapons, we didn't have them, but we were met by people, unarmed, holding hands, standing in the cold, and just not letting the tanks pass. And it was extremely difficult time, but we knew that we had to defend our freedom and our young democracy, even if it's a cost of life. We defended it, we began to grow as an independent country, and it's coincided so that the technology advent of IT into the world almost coincided with these times. So we had this luxury of starting to build our country, embedding the technology into the fabric of our state. And that's why now we have a really very well advanced digital public services. We have very well-developed infrastructure, even by global standards. Does it mean by default that we have a good democracy? Not necessarily. Of course, we trust in general our institution, but if you look at the three top, the most trusted, this is the army, the police, and the president. Okay, but the government and the parliament, which is elected by people, is really at the bottom line if you look at all these priorities. So that means that even when you have a very good digital infrastructure in your public sector, not necessarily you have democracy there, like something given. You have to do it, and like more effort there. And now turning to technology. In early 2000s, when I began to work in public sector for my government as a young specialist entrusted to work in the first agency established to build this digital society in our country, we really saw this information society as like the highest step of our society's development, next stage, which will bring so many good things just through embedding technology. And yeah, we thought that now everyone can be heard, everyone has voice. And yes, indeed, we have voice. And we have so much noise together with that. So much competition for attention, clicks, bytes, and all this mistrust and polarization in the societies which came along. Of course, technology can be used to do so many amazing things. And one example, just one example from Lithuania. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, we solidarized immediately because we have this shared history and we know that the danger we face is the same. And we might be next on the line. So we do a lot to help Ukraine, but not just by official government channels, the support is huge, but also people fundraise money, like this so-called Radaram campaign, which was started by just activists, non-figure journalists on social media, and just in a matter of weeks, we collected 14 million euros from people, which we used to buy expensive air surveillance systems, so the soldiers on Ukrainian front could spot better incoming missiles and drones and protect themselves. And this is happening all the time, every day, using social networks. But on the other hand, Russia is really weaponizing this digital space, and what we have there is so much distrust and miscommunication and disinformation which is being generated there, which just floods the screen of less critical people in Lithuania, in Poland, in Ukraine, everywhere in the region. So what to do? Because we have this polarization, that's true. First of all, I think it's about education in critical thinking, starting from children and trying to reach adults as well, because yes, we have to educate people in using digital technology or AI for sure, but first of all, we have to be able to think critically and to distinguish facts from falsehood. Then, of course, finding better ways to connect state with the people. And I think that GovTech labs or similar initiatives really help to test and to experiment and to see what can work. And third, how to bring us from our screens back to physical world. It's so easy to hate someone that you don't know. You see a username, you see something you don't like, and you can really pour all your hate there. But when you see a person, you cannot do that. So I think here it's a beautiful platform to find these best practices and to find best answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Futurizing democracy means also to look at what are the South American experiences tell us in terms of democratic participation, and also what's the actually futurized concept of democracy as it is lived, practiced, thought for, and also striven for in a country like Brazil. And I'm very happy to say hello to Rodrigo Assunção, who is the CEO of DataPrev, working for the Brazilian government and making sure that all social security data, all education data, even some health data are processed nicely, not just by mainframes, but also by AI. Rodrigo.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here and presenting some ideas. I'm wise enough not to brag about my numbers in India. We usually do that elsewhere, but never in India nor in China. But in other places, they're impressive. This is the company. It's a fully state-owned company. We process basically all of Brazilian social data, labor data, social security data, social assistance data, and now education data as well. So, but the ideas I brought were on these elements, that the digitalization of everyday life, together with social networks, have opportunities and threats, which is obvious. But some of the divisions are being stated as the opposition between, or the choices that we have to make between techno-socialism and techno-feudalism. People were talking about this yesterday, like Dorothy. So if you're not called Musk, Zuckerberg, or Gates, or something like that, and if you're not interested in becoming part of a butler class, perhaps going towards techno-socialism, fighting for technology for inclusion might be a good idea. But then we have to face that between feudalism and socialism, you have something called capitalism in terms of historical evolution, which seems to be central to all these discussions that we're having. And we'll get back to that. I love the phrase electoral autocratic regimes. It's the threat that most of us are facing. But now we're also having a huge conflict between corporations, mostly captained by big tech, and nation states. When you have individuals whose net worth is larger than states, and they decide that they can individually intervene in a conflict such was mentioned by the Ukrainian war, where an individual interfered and decided how communications were going to happen, then we have something new on the planet. We have something that we haven't seen before, and we're going to need to position ourselves, because democracy, as we understand it, is mostly centered around nation states. There are no democratic concepts in corporations. And we have to understand that people are avoiding these concepts also for a reason. And many of these elements of disturbance, fake news, weaponization of media are happening for money, because of capitalism, but also to undermine the concept of nation states. The democratic challenges concerning legislation, you have the ambition to legislate technological advancements. Unfortunately, that has never succeeded. Technology walks much faster, runs much faster than the legislative process. And we've got to be aware of that, because tech-focused legislation, in some cases, and I saw some very good cases here being presented, but some of the bad elements or the bad results are already covered by regular laws. monopolies, slander, defamation, falsehood, theft, even murder, if you go further. So these things we already have, and we can already face many of the challenges, because pursuing technologically specific legislation sometimes, in some places and in some cases, is also a hoax. Lawfare and fact-checking. We've discovered in Brazil, we're also a very polarized society, that many of the campaigns boil down to something like 200 individuals that captain chains of command of spreading misinformation, for us mostly on WhatsApp. If you get down to 200 individuals that are purposefully doing this to keep on making money, to keep on polarizing, to dispute power, then you can also get back at them. You can use lawfare to go after them and wreck their lives with pursuit of suits in the law courts and get them out of this public sphere. The meltdown of truth, however, we have to understand, is something that we're not going to go back. The word, the written word, the published word, no longer has authority. And now we're seeing the meltdown of the authority of the image. Until very recently, a photograph was considered true by default. An image or a movie was considered truth by default. That is no longer happening. But society has to learn to understand this, as we understand that somebody's opinion or written text is just that. We're going to have to evolve to understand that the image also is no longer the reflection of truth. And as Peter mentioned, we need to accept that we already have tools to face many of these corporations. We need to tax the hell out of them. At least it will bring us back some possibility to do some good while all these things adjust in this new society. So, and this is a mistake, it's not a new word, econology, it's just the T that's missing. Dorothy was talking about technological dependence yesterday. It's not something we're going to overcome just by appealing to our consciousness. There's only one country in the world that managed to get rid of Microsoft in the government, and even that country still has 50% using, and they did it because of war. They did not do it because of consciousness. The only country is Russia. So they were forced to do it. But what I mean to hear is that it's incredibly difficult. We tried a couple of times already in Brazil, and it's not easy. It's easy when you're talking main industrial IT, when you're talking about specialized people. But when you're talking about broad uses of convenience applications like office applications, then you're facing an uphill battle that we need to face with incredibly potent and broad support. And then we come down to individualism versus citizen participation. The atomization of society and the decline...
One more minute.
Sure. And collectivity. The social networks that point towards a hyper-individualism versus collective organism. People believe that they are individuals and that supersedes the community. It's very difficult to fight and struggle when that happens. You have the echo chamber that you were talking about, and the millions that were silent while some few managed to scream very loud. And of course, government digital transformation has to choose whether it's going to treat citizens as citizens or citizens as consumers. If we treat citizens as consumers, then the middle class defines that it wants more government, and government that serves themselves, and not allow it for distribution for the poor. So citizens have to stay citizens, and consumers are out of the picture in the relationship between government and citizenry. And of course, to end, we have to empower and resignify democracy. There are many participatory tools for budgeting and constant and micro decision-making, significant decision-making, because democracy was being eroded much before technology, much before AI, because we are not allowed to talk about economy. The most important elements of our lives, the things that affect us most, are to be seen as natural, scientific, deterministic, and not something that should be debated publicly. While we accept that, democracy will be corroded, and technology is just the tool that is doing the eroding now. We have to recover the belief that politics can generate effective transformations. The Brazilian, and this is the last slide, the Brazilian collaboration for this, our version of DPI, which we have been doing for a couple of decades now, is to consolidate the national data infrastructure. This, if you don't have AI, or if you're starting AI, you're not sure where AI go, every country needs to face this challenge. Setting up the national data infrastructure, as important as roads, ports, airports, telecom, you need to get control of your data. Osama was mentioning this. This is the real struggle, because pretty soon something new is going to come along beyond AI, which will be called, I don't know, post-AI, whatever. But the data, whether we have it, whether we control it, whether we keep it, this, I believe, is what will determine our futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. I have a question for you. Does everybody of you have a watch? Yes? Then you know that we are late. Now you have two choices. We can three choices. We can stop right away. We can have 3 questions from the audience, or I can have 1 question for each of the panelists for, let's say, 2-sentence answers. Who wants to stop right away? Who wants questions from the audience? Who wants me to ask short questions? Vast majority. I did not think that I'm so popular after having said so many things. Okay, I'll start with you, Madara. What is it, what you think would be the most important factor which makes the mobilization of young people, Gen Z people, grow broader and become institutionalized more in terms of the political process in Kenya? 1 answer. 3 sentences.
I don't have an answer to that one. I think
you're a smart man. You got to be a professor. You should have the answer.
Okay. I'll start from a very different perspective, but it'll come to your answer.
Okay. 3 sentences.
Yeah, just 2 sentences. Many of the young people are still struggling with the basics of life, which the government is supposed to be making better, but is making harder. So until we can get these basic issues sorted out, then many of them don't really care who leads them, because they don't see the connection between the leader and their basics.
Okay, so there's no solution but the challenge. Dashna, I liked very much your juxtaposition, if not opposition, between perceived control and actual control. That's also regarding, what Rodrigo was later on talking about, the national data infrastructure, that is basically an ownership issue where the perceived and the actual control might be more transparent. In which way do you see that this issue between perceived control and actual control can be much more made transparent in order to facilitate democratic processes?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge indeed, Peter.
Speak up, please.
I think currently a lot of the control resides with the big techs, and it's through the IP that they hold specifically that is kind of promoting that power and control. I think we have a big challenge to change that narrative, and I think it realistically needs to come through our governing bodies. through a lot of the policies and legal frameworks that they put in place in order to promote that transparency. So at the minute, for example, we don't know the exact data in which a lot of these models are being trained on, and there is a growing profile that this will now encompass synthetic data as well, which is an extremely damaging future that we need to get ahead of. So I think, yes, I'd drive it from the top always.
Thank you very much. Uma, you are working in the Foresight unit, and you showed us a little bit the work you're doing with the OECD. And some of it, what you suggested, are very much, let's say, sectorized solutions. In which way does the question of the activation of, for instance, Gen Z, or the issue of power and control from the political economy side, what Dashna was talking about, enter into your foresight? And how do you basically then adjust that? Because to get out of sight of the technocratic discourse. Uma.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. Well, I'll start by saying that I speak in semicolons, so I'm going to cheat on my 3 sentences.
Okay, good. Very smart.
One of the key things that we get to do that is really unique about the way that the OECD gets to operate, and our unit specifically, is that we work with businesses, trade unions, and civil society in crafting our foresight scenarios and our potential trends and trajectories. At the OECD, there are some committees. There's the business at OECD, trade unions at OECD, and there's also civil society. These are committees that sit at every single, key meeting, and they bring their opinions into the fray. One of the key things is that none of the foresight work works unless you have a diversity of opinions. If we're all talking to each other, we're not able to come up with those edge cases and those new ideas that we would have missed. So I guess honestly, one of the best things about it is that we're able to open the door to have dialogue with those communities that might not necessarily be possible in more, rigid or traditional kind of structures.
Go to Kenya, talk to the students, include them in your foresight work. That might be a good solution. That is a really interesting thing also for you, Rama. You were giving us a lot of overview of what government does, and you also alluded to how there are best practice cases for the use of AI for social empowerment. Now, I want to switch this and make it a little bit more difficult for you. What about democratic empowerment?
Okay.
Give me one example.
Sure.
Give them one example. Give us one example.
Sure. There are 2 areas where we can look at democratic.
Speak into the microphone.
Democratic empowerment, Yeah. One is to build trust within the institutions of democracy. The second is to actually enable large-scale participation in the democratic process. So one example that I would like to, in the second one, what we did was, while we hear about misinformation, disinformation, harming the institutions or the entire process of democracies. So the other challenge we faced in India, especially, is most of the voters in the urban areas, they do not come out and vote. While the percentage of voting in rural areas is about 80%, the percentage of voting in urban is just less than 50, around 40 plus, So this was around COVID time when we were having these elections. So how do we actually increase that participation was one of the biggest challenges in everybody's mind. So we came out with a smartphone-based voting system. It's a very simple to use solution, smartphone-based solution, where a voter just needs to register that he's a voter. Usually that's done in as a manual process where a person goes to the polling booth, shows his ID card, and then he's allowed to vote. What we did was he has to take a picture, selfie, upload it onto the system. The system automatically validates using AI whether he is a registered voter, comparing with the database. So we used AI to authenticate an individual. That's number one. Second, once a voter votes for a particular candidate, how are you going to secure those votes, right? We use blockchain actually to secure those votes. So at the intersection of AI and blockchain, we developed the system, very robust, easy to use. We actually, carried out a dry run. Citizens were really, really happy, just with the click of a mouse, button, you can actually vote, they were thrilled. But it needs a political will to take it forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Eva, you are consulting with a lot of governments around the world, and you are telling us a little story about Lithuania. The digitization of a society and complete, let's say, birth or cradle to grave coverage does not actually change the question of how power democratically is exercised. Give us, from your own personal view, one little hint of what you think is the most important lever to basically still try to do it.
I think it's all about motivation. For the last 10 years, we were already quite relaxed. But as soon as things began to happen, began to hit, and the invasion into Ukraine happened, now Lithuania, we live in a very, very different world than several years ago, and our priorities are different. And the civic engagement became much, much stronger, not because the government did something like one initiative or something, but people became much more motivated. And of course, we have government-provided tools to collect opinions, to be involved, to decide, but as well, social networks play a huge role. And even if they are not Lithuanian-owned, but still they work, and government then comes there and communicates to people. So I think the government has to find the way, even and then it's not about fancy technological tools, but about motivation of the people to be a part.
So it's a sense of urgency in terms of change required. So that is something which, Madara, you said, if you're hungry and if you're deprived, even that sense of urgency cannot be looking at, let's say, the power structure, but you're looking at the daily survival. Last question. Rodrigo introduced a very difficult concept, and that is, I think it's very much Latin to think about re-signifying democracy. Do you know what he means by re-signifying democracy? No. I'm sure that outside of all the semioticians which are in this room, nobody knows what he actually meant. But therefore, I will retranslate this question, okay? I will retranslate this question. You're saying basically that the meaning of democracy needs to be updated, okay? So if you would say, I'm going to reset democracy, which is also something which you would like as a technological term, reset democracy. What would democracy look like in that re-signified situation or epoch?
So,
one sentence.
Yes, so
3 semicolons.
The only alternative to politics is war. That's what we invented. Either we have politics or we have war. So when democracy was eroded, whitewashed, became something that did not affect the lives of people, mostly in my view, because economy was taken out of democracy. You're not allowed to discuss the economic structures. You're not allowed to talk about the economic regimes. All you were allowed was to vote for the clown in charge. That is not democracy. This concept was eroded. To re-signify it, you have to empower democracy. Whatever choices you make through politics have to mean things, even bad things, because you can't be protected from your own decisions. Otherwise, you never learn, you never evolve, you never accomplish anything. So democracy has to become real again. That's where I think we need to apply our efforts and our technology.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Thank you very much, Eva. Thank you very much, Rama. Thank you very much, Umar. Thank you very much, Darshana. And thank you very much, Madara. You are an absolutely great panel. I would love to continue on until 9 o'clock at night, but Nora and other people tell me that there are people who are wanting to get in and talk about not just futurizing democracy, but also how to decentralize truth and how to change society according to this. Thank you very much. You were absolutely great. You are great, and you will be great.